Two ingenious solutions to Florida's ongoing battles with wild reptiles, and for that, deploying robotic rabbits to help capture invasive Burmese pythons in the Everglades.
Question: how do you hunt a predator that erases its footprints in water and grass? Answer: you don't chase it, you make it come to you. This episode investigates Florida's robotic rabbit decoys, machines built to mimic marsh rabbits without sacrificing a single animal. Why did live bait tests spark backlash? And how did engineers bottle heat, musk, and movement into a field-ready lure?
Attract the pythons, allowing wildlife officers to swoop in and catch them.
You'll hear the precise cues that pulled pythons from hiding, plus the uncomfortable truth the data exposed about scale, cost, and protecting a collapsing food web. To understand why such a lure was needed at all, we have to hear what went silent first. From pet shop curiosities to a vanishing soundscape, this is how a novelty became a force that rewired an ecosystem. A quiet Everglades night used to crackle with small mammal noise. Why did the chorus go silent within a generation? The story starts in roadside terrariums and living rooms. Small, patterned juveniles, sold as manageable curiosities, entered a market that rewarded novelty over foresight. Growth turned novelty into burden. Some owners opened backyard gates. Then storms tore through South Florida, shattering enclosures and scattering stock into canals and sloughs. In 1992, Hurricane Andrew accelerated the leak. The climate didn't slow them, it accelerated them. Mild winters, abundant cover, and prey that had never learned to read a constrictor's approach. Public campaigns rose to meet the spread. Volunteer hunts, prizes, nighttime patrols. Crews cruised levee roads with headlamps and thermal optics. They did remove snakes, and the footage looked decisive. Yet the population line refused to bend. Biologists now estimate tens of thousands of Burmese pythons roam South Florida, numbers that blunt any single-season push. Each capture felt like emptying a flooded room with a teaspoon while the pipe kept running. Meanwhile, the food web faltered. Raccoons vanished from routes once littered with their tracks. Opossums thinned to rumor. Marsh rabbits, once routine along dikes, fell out of the landscape entirely in wide zones. That loss didn't stay in one lane. Fewer scavengers slowed carcass breakdown. Nutrients lingered in the wrong places. Wading birds entered marshes where the ground crew had been pulled away. The system dimmed like a town losing power block by block. Then the forensics arrived. Necropsy tables confirmed what the rumor mill whispered: large mammals inside coils. Deer turned up in stomachs, evidence that the predator's reach extended into the top tiers of available prey. Telemetry tied movement to infrastructure. Tagged snakes repeatedly hugged canal berms and culvert networks, using straight lines humans built as dispersal corridors. The map inverted. Our boundaries became their highways. Search tactics kept assuming sight would solve it. But python biology contradicts that premise. Cryptic coloration smears into sawgrass and marl. Water swallows a wake in seconds. The snakes can lie under a tuft and become a contour, not an animal. You can sweep a field with binoculars and never invite a flinch. When stillness is a strategy, line of sight becomes theater more than detection. Dogs broke that stalemate. Handlers put trained noses, Truman, a black Labrador, and Eleanor, a Dutch shepherd, to work on faint musk trails that lingered where bodies moved hours earlier. Finds happened fast. Nests were located. Routes revealed themselves as scent strings drawn through cattails and gumbo limbo humps. Yet limits surfaced as quickly as winds. Heat cooks canine performance. Distance multiplies logistics. Scaling teams across 1 million-plus acres would devour budgets and leave much of the wet prairie untouched on any given day. Stakes climbed because the landscape operates like a chain of islands, even on a single sheet of water. Breeding pockets hold, then export. Remove one adult from a node, and a neighbor drifts in along the canal edge or the tree island rim. A vacancy is an invitation, not a victory. You could patrol one rim nightly and still miss the quiet ingress 2 miles away. The mystery persists precisely because the searcher is visible and the quarry is not. Hunters light roads. Boats buzz sloughs. The snakes watch and wait. To change outcomes, strategy had to invert. Not chase, but compel a reveal. That pivot began with a contentious tool, one that asked a harder question about the cues that draw an ambush predator out of cover, and whether engineering could reproduce them without crossing an ethical line. The rabbit blueprint. Ethics collide with engineering. What combination of heat, musk, and micro-movement draws an apex ambush predator out of cover in minutes? The story starts in controlled pens along narrow swamp trails. Live marsh rabbits, protected behind welded mesh and anchored frames, radiated body heat and scent through the reeds. Pythons arrived with unsettling speed, not as drifters, but as a procession. A concentration that outlined where breeding pressure already ran high. Within one site, counts rose fast enough to sketch a map of hotspots, and with it, a working theory. If you present the right cues, the snakes come to you. But the images of huddled rabbits detonated a backlash. The method produced data. It also produced outrage. Welfare groups rejected the premise on moral grounds. Scientists split over necessity versus ethics. Funding dried up. Field access followed. The technique worked, yet it could not continue. Not politically, not publicly. Not for the technicians who had to walk between duty and conscience. So the team pivoted. Engineers and biologists wrote a replica, piece by piece. Heat first.
Wildlife biologists in the Sunshine State are deploying a new weapon in an effort to eradicate this threat to the Everglades: robotic rabbit.
Thermal pads tuned to the narrow band that a python's infrared receptors resolve at striking range. Scent second. Cartridges that bled a mammal musk, calibrated to drift without overwhelming handlers. Movement last. Quiet micromotors that sent an ear into a staccato flick. Then stillness. Then another flick. Enough to suggest vulnerability without telegraphing artifice. They built for endurance. Solar panels trickle-charged sealed batteries because swamp logistics punish anything that needs a wall outlet.
Yeah, these are solar-powered bunnies. They look, they move, they even smell like the real animal.
Housings used weatherproof polymers, seams gasketed against humidity and fine silt. Internal thermostats kept the heat signature stable during cold snaps and afternoon spikes. Motion-triggered cameras and a low-power transmitter logged approach vectors, timestamps, and dwell time before contact. Metadata that would matter more than the strike itself. Field protocol guarded everything else. Protective pins sat around each decoy, not to corral pythons, but to prevent opportunists like raccoons from mauling the hardware. The openings channeled snakes into observable lanes, where angles and distances were known in advance. Clusters of decoys, staggered along a canal berm, allowed triangulation. When 2 units pinged within a narrow window, teams could infer a corridor rather than a random pass. Early deployments started returning patterns. Cameras caught gliding approaches that paused, coiled, then eased away. A spectrum of interest that correlated with temperature, barometer shifts, and shallow rises in water level. Alerts stacked up around certain nodes, and when crews followed, they encountered large females heavy with eggs. Hot zones sharpened into polygons on a map, bounded by levees, culverts, and tree islands. The most compelling aspect was how the decoys doubled as bait and as an intelligence network, converting the marsh into a distributed sensor and drawing a digital portrait of movement corridors and peak hours. Yet costs pressed in. Each unit required careful assembly and field hardening. The network demanded transport, maintenance rides, and spare parts staged where roads end and water begins. Hardware aged faster in heat and brackish spray. Batteries that promised long duty cycles lost capacity. Scaling from successful field clusters to broad coverage would require sustained funding and patience. Still, the signal was clear. The decoys did not end the invasion. They converted a chaotic landscape into a compendium of approach traces, pause points, and seasonal surges. The swamp became a sensor grid, not perfect, but directional. And direction turns effort into leverage. You could call it an arm's-length alliance between ethics and engineering. No prey lost, yet signals strong enough to pull an unseen hunter into the open. What follows is a quieter method. Less spectacle, more inference. Built for places where our eyes fail and patterns matter. Conclusion. The Everglades delivered a broader rule. When threats operate beyond human reach, scale, darkness, and silence, traditional patrols stall. Intelligence tools change the odds. Thermal cues, telemetry, and quiet cameras turned absence into actionable signal. So here's the question for you. Should we invest in wide area sensing, decoys that never tire, drones that map heat, data that stitches patterns, or accept losses we helped create? Leave your view in the comments. Your answer influences what gets funded next. If you pursue mysteries that resist simple fixes, subscribe. The next chapter follows the sensors deeper into the network, tracing corridors where timing and terrain align, and where the hidden starts to answer back.